Would you dare challenge a giant over 8 feet tall after he slapped you in front of the entire galactic elite? I once saw someone do exactly that and turn it into his greatest mistake. It happened during my 43 cycles serving as cultural attaché for Orion. And while I've witnessed countless bizarre moments in diplomacy, nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to what unfolded that night on the Aurora Prime star station. Picture the scene. A lavish reception at the very heart of the Galactic Council. Crystal goblets floated on anti-grav trays. An orchestra played metallophonic music worth more than the annual budget of entire planets. And everywhere, diplomats strutted about, boasting of their accomplishments as if interstellar cooperation were some kind of vanity contest. The trending topic of the evening, much to my irritation, was humanity. They called them primitive, violent, little more than beasts who solved every problem with fists. Not one of them had ever met a human in person, yet they parroted cliches from sensationalist news feeds and cheap dramas, as though those stereotypes were universal truths. I listened as they mocked their traditions. They still practice hand-to-hand combat, bragged one four-eyed ambassador smugly. Can you imagine? Actual fistfights in the 21st century, laughed another, drawing nervous chuckles around him. The room filled with sharper, crueler remarks, and I clenched my jaw. Yes, humans came from a dangerous world. We all knew that. But the way they described them, you'd think they were nothing but savage brutes, incapable of anything beyond growls and bloodshed. And then it happened. The hall doors swung open with a flourish, and the station's announcer declared, Ambassador Lyra Cade, representative of the Terran Federation. I turned with everyone else, expecting a fierce-looking warrior, perhaps armored, someone who would confirm their prejudices. I was wrong. The human who entered stood barely 5'5". She wore a simple yet elegant blue dress, and she was smiling. Yes, smiling with genuine warmth, as though she were truly glad to be there. The silence was deafening, heads turned, whispers rippled, disbelieving gestures spread across the room. That's the human, someone muttered. She must be an assistant. Surely the real ambassador hasn't arrived yet. But Lyra was not intimidated. She walked with the grace of someone who knew exactly where she was and why. She greeted each diplomat with flawless pronunciation, even names that twisted most tongues. She spoke of economics, cultural exchange, trade agreements. I watched her handle herself like a consummate professional, while others stared as if she were some creature in a zoo. Some looked fearful, others mocking, many simply fascinated in the worst way. As the night wore on, the jokes grew louder. The humans believe in something called mixed martial arts. They actually pay to beat each other up, sneered one attaché. What else could you expect from a species that evolved on a death world? Laughed another, raising his glass. Personal recorders began blinking to life, as though the crowd expected the savage to snap at any moment. But she didn't. Lyra kept her smile, though I noticed small shifts, tension in her shoulders, a cold glint in her eyes. She wasn't just enduring the insults, she was memorizing them, one by one, and then he arrived. Vorath Dren, merchant prince of the Dravaran Confederacy. A colossus nearly 8 feet tall, clad in a gaudy purple bio-armor that screamed, I have more wealth than sense. His entourage, a pack of sycophants, laughed at anything he said. They positioned themselves near the refreshment station, waiting for prey. And when Lyra approached, they blocked her path like clumsy predators closing in. Vorath's voice thundered through the hall. Well, well, if it isn't our little primitive guest. Tell me, human, is it true your kind still mates by fighting? The laughter that followed was sharp, ugly, almost animalistic. And Lyra, calm as ever, replied, I believe you're confusing us with another species, Your Excellency. Human courtship is actually quite civilized. Her words only drew more jeers from Vorath's pack. Violence, one sneered. Do they teach their children to fight before they can even walk? Added another. The crowd began to gather, like scavengers circling a fresh corpse. Recorders glowed to life, all eyes locked on the unfolding spectacle. Vorath Dren leaned down until his massive face was only inches from hers, his shadow swallowing her whole. When you crawl back to your savage world, he taunted, what will you tell your tribal chiefs? That the civilized races laughed in your face? The cruelty in his tone made my stomach turn. This was no longer diplomacy. This was harassment. And then it happened. Before 300 of the most influential beings in the galaxy, with every eye fixed on him, Vorath Dren raised his armored hand and struck the human ambassador across the face. The blow cracked like a gunshot. The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the hum of the life support systems. No one moved. No one breathed. Vorath grinned, expecting tears, rage, a furious outburst that would confirm every prejudice. But no. Ambassador Lyra Cade smiled too. Not warmly this time, but with something cold, calculating, terrifying in its serenity. "Thank you, Your Excellency," she said softly. "I was hoping you'd do something like that." And in that instant, she invoked the Dravaran Code of Honor, a challenge no one could refuse. A duel. The silence deepened. Calling upon the Dravaran Code was no symbolic gesture. It was a binding legal trap. Vorath Dren, merchant prince, had humiliated an ambassador in front of witnesses. Now he had only two choices: accept the duel or condemn his bloodline to eternal disgrace. His purple skin paled to a sickly blue. "That's impossible," he stammered. "You're not Dravaran. You can't invoke our code." Lyra's smile never wavered. Article 7 of the Galactic Diplomatic Accord permits it. If I recall correctly, your own legal scholars helped draft it. A murmur rippled through the hall. Vorath was trapped. To refuse meant dishonor. To accept meant risking everything against a small human in a cocktail dress. Finally, he growled, "Very well. If you wish to be humiliated before the entire galaxy, so be it." Within minutes, the grand reception hall had transformed into an improvised arena. Energy barriers shimmered to life, protecting the onlookers. Diplomats crowded the edges, recorders flashing, betting slips already trading hands, as if this were a blood sport instead of a trial of honor. Vorath shed his ceremonial robes, revealing the full bulk of his bioarmor. Chitinous plating, muscles honed by decades of brutal training, the very image of raw brutality. He roared, pounded his chest, strutted like a gladiator. Lyra, in contrast, simply removed her shoes and tied back her hair. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing calmly. She didn't look like she was preparing for a fight. She looked like she was meditating. The Dravaran arbiter raised his ceremonial staff and let it fall with a metallic crash. "Let the combat begin." Vorath charged like a war train, his massive fists sweeping down in a devastating arc, a strike that would have pulverized her skull had it landed. But Lyra was no longer there. Two light steps carried her aside, and the Colossus crashed full force into the energy barrier, shaking the very deck plating. The crowd gasped in shock, a roar of disbelief flooding the chamber. "Stand still, coward!" Vorath bellowed, spinning back with fury. He lunged again, faster this time. Lyra waited until the very last moment, then dropped low, sweeping his legs out from under him. The giant hit the floor with such force the ground trembled. And as he tried to rise, something white and bloody rolled across the arena floor. A tooth. His tooth. Nervous laughter died instantly. No one had expected this. Vorath roared, spitting more purple blood. "Lucky strike," Lyra, calm as ever, replied. "On the contrary, I'd say it was quite deliberate." The audience murmured uneasily. This was no comedy anymore. It was unsettling. Vorath grew more cautious now, throwing short probing strikes, using his reach to keep her at bay. But each time he overcommitted, she was there. A precise blow to his elbow joint, a sharp kick to the knee, a perfectly timed strike to the seam between armor plates. Each attack small, but surgical. Every strike found a weakness, a nerve, a gap, a fragile joint. And with each mistake the prince made, another tooth broke loose. 2, 3, 4. I watched in frozen disbelief. This wasn't brute force. This was knowledge. The human was dismantling him piece by piece like an engineer stripping down a machine. Her movements were clean, clinical, free of unnecessary emotion. The crowd, once loud and mocking, was falling silent. The spectacle had become something far more serious, a public humiliation no one would ever forget. Vorath gasped for breath, his bio-armor cracked, his mouth dripping blood. "What are you?" he spat through broken teeth. Lyra's calm smile chilled every witness to the bone. "Exactly what you called me, Your Excellency, a savage from a death world." Desperate, the prince made his fatal mistake. With a guttural snarl, he ripped a molecular disruption blade from his armor. The weapon's deadly hum filled the air. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. This was forbidden. To break the code of honor in a Dravaran duel wasn't just illegal, it was the greatest dishonor imaginable. Lyra looked at him with disappointment. almost sadness. "Oh, Excellency, you really shouldn't have done that." And then Vorath Dren's true nightmare began. He roared and charged, the blade sparking with forbidden energy. The crowd screamed. Some diplomats stumbled back to the walls, terrified the blow might shatter the energy barriers. But Lyra didn't move, not until the very last instant. Her body flowed like water. With a flawless pivot, she seized the prince's wrist mid-swing, twisted it at an impossible angle, and forced him to drop the weapon. A sharp crack echoed across the arena. "Compound fracture of the radius and ulna," she observed coldly, like a professor delivering a lecture. The blade clattered to the floor, deactivated. Vorath howled in agony, crumpling to his knees, spitting more purple blood. Lyra crouched, gripped his jaw with unsettling gentleness, and plucked out another tooth. 8, she whispered. One by one, with surgical precision, she continued. 9, 10, 11, until 12 bloody teeth lay scattered across the metal floor. Each number landed like a hammer blow in the suffocating silence of the hall. When at last she left him unconscious on the deck, Lyra rose calmly. She brushed a few drops of blood from her blue dress, adjusted her hair, and turned to face the assembly. Her voice rang clear and steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. 12 teeth, exactly as promised. No one moved. No one breathed. The ambassador stepped forward, hands clasped behind her back, as though she were once again the smiling diplomat from minutes before. "Now then," she said, "does anyone else care to debate whether humans are savages?" Absolute silence swept the chamber. The same dignitaries who had mocked and recorded her now stared in fearful respect, not daring to speak. Lyra let the silence linger until every gaze had dropped from hers. Then she spoke again, this time warmer. "Listen well. Humans do not seek violence. We prefer diplomacy, negotiation, the peaceful resolution of conflict. But if someone chooses to push beyond the bounds of civilization, we finish what others begin." She paused, letting every witness see Vorath's broken body surrounded by his bloodied teeth. The capacity for violence is not barbarism. True civilization is knowing when to wield it and when to restrain it. With that, she slipped her shoes back on, holding them casually in one hand, and headed for the exit. "Good evening, everyone. I trust the rest of the reception will be more peaceful." The crowd parted before her like she was a force of nature itself. And when the doors closed behind her, I knew nothing would ever be the same. That night on Aurora Prime, we did not witness barbarism. We witnessed what it truly means to be human.